This is Jonathan Aguilar here for Pro Boxing Fans. Delighted to be joined by former Southern Area, two-time Southern Area champion.
Two weight
as well. Esteemed trainer Gary Logan. Gary, thanks very much for joining me over Zoom today.
Nice to be here, mate.
How are you keeping? How's your family?
Yeah, family's good, thank God. Yeah, they're all good. I've had a little scare with a sister-in-law that had she had COVID symptoms and she was very unwell, but she's come out the other side, thankfully. Both her and my brother have come out of it the other side. You know, my brother wasn't well, but he wasn't as bad as she was. So, you know, thank God they're both still here and they're recovering. They're very sprightly and they're doing lots of gardening in Wales where they live, you know.
That's good to hear. I mean, these positive stories are good to hear, especially during this time.
Yeah. We've had, you know, the boxing world's lost a good few guys lately, hasn't it? You know, sadly, Les Stevens from Pinewood Star recently passed, and Mr. Menendez from Mr. Mendes, the guy that started the Mendes gym in New York, who I met a couple of times. So it is pretty sad.
Absolutely. Obviously, with you training Dion Juma, the English cruiserweight champion, spoke to him the other day actually. But you know, how much contact have you had with Dion? Are you setting him sort of training regimes to get on with during?
Yeah, well, you know, Dion's a very driven young man. He was always very driven from the very first time I met him way back, 2011. So Dion keeping himself in shape and training is not a problem. He can do that quite easily. If he needs my assistance on anything technical, we talk virtually most days. But Dion, I very much hope I get another Dion Juma in my career. I very, very much hope somebody that's a student of the game but can fight. You get a lot of guys, they're students of the game because they need to learn to fight. Dion, when I say fight, he's a really good boxer, but he's got a fighter's mentality. I have to actually rein him in sometimes to not be overly aggressive and be a bit, how can I say it, bit haphazard and a bit wild in there, you know. Not so much wild, but just not as disciplined as he needs to be because he just wants to do damage, you know. And but his training ethic, I can't question it. It's what every boxer or martial artist, I believe, should have. You know, it's the attention to detail. It's training hard. It's living the life of a fighter. It's not a plaything. It's not something that he can post his latest workout on social media and tap in those amazing words. Oh yeah, getting gains, done my 5 kilos. You're supposed to do, I've done my 5 kilometers. You're supposed to do your 5 kilometers. That's, you know, the world doesn't need to know about it, you know? And, excuse me. Dion is he's an exception to that. He's a role model. And so I haven't got any worries about how fit he is now or is he keeping himself in shape. The only thing I probably would worry about is his mental frustration. He's come so close to getting his British title shot. Richard Riakporhe has to defend against him or relinquish. And you know, it's right on the cusp, having done the hard work against Sam Hyde. Obviously, we're going to have another hard fight against Richard, but so that's the only thing I'm worried about. The only thing that concerns me, I wouldn't be worried about it because the fact that we talk most days, I know that mentally he's in a better place than I could have expected.
I mean, that Sam Hyde fight was a brilliant fight. We'll definitely get onto that in a bit.
Yeah.
How, in terms of your role as a trainer, how does it sort of differ during this time? Obviously, you're not in the gym, but are you sort of having more time to sort of learn about, maybe study future opponents or look back at past performances, or does it change at all?
Yeah, it gives you, yeah, you're right. You're bang on there. It gives you more time to do all of those things, to look at what makes a Jake Massey good, what makes a Chris Billam-Smith good, what makes a Sam McCarthy good, you know, and also what we could take advantage of when we get down the road to fight these guys, you know, because I do believe all of these guys, including Sam Hyde again, will have a part to play in Dion's near future once we get going, you know. What makes Riakporhe as effective as he is, or what can we take advantage of? You know, I've had close-hand knowledge with those fighters, with especially Billam-Smith and Richard, because Dion sparred with them numerous times, you know. And so gives you, this time is, you know, they say out of bad times come good, you know, if you want them to be. And I've used this time progressively to make myself a better coach, learn new things as well. I won't say new things, because the things I study are just age-old fundamentals, you know. I'm looking at what made Ray Arcel a great coach, what made Eddie Futch a great coach, what makes Naazim Richardson a great coach. Naazim Richardson learned from a lot of the old coaches, you know, and that is the only reason why he was ever in camp with Bernard Hopkins. Naazim Richardson learned under Bowie Fischer, who would have learned from some of the old sages of back in the day in Philadelphia times, of which Eddie Futch was one of them. So, you know, and I've been very fortunate. I didn't, you know, when you're young, you don't realise how fortunate you are. I was up close with Eddie Futch and Mike McCullum in the late 80s and early 90s, when they were coming over to fight the likes of our Michael Watson, Earl Graham, and the Glenn Thomas fight at Hammersmith Odeon, which I boxed on the undercard. So I was around these guys all the time. So now I've had time to tap back in. Don't get me wrong, I've never ever forgotten what I've learned there, but now I'm actually tapping into it more. I'm revisiting it mentally. I'm benefiting from it, you know, because I've got the time to think like that. You know, I had a great coach, Carly Carew. I've worked closely with Adam Booth. I've learned so much from Adam. I think Adam would say he's probably learned a little bit from me as well, because we came up together as I've known Adam since I was like 14. We boxed at 14 and we've been friends ever since, you know. So, yeah, so it's been a very reflective time. It's made me think what I'm going to do better as a coach for my fighters, and we move on from there, yeah.
I mean, you say things you might make better. Is there anything sort of you can tell us? Is it just sort of in training regimes? Is it sort of advice?
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's just little things. I mean, I think without sounding grandiose and cocky, there's not a lot that I don't know about the game now, you know, because it's never been something that I've wanted to do just because it's the only thing I can do. You know, I wouldn't call out any names, but over my years, even when I was a kid, I always looked at coaches who maybe didn't say a lot, or maybe coaches that said a lot because they wanted to be noticed. Or I noticed coaches that they had knowledge. You could just see it. There's something about them, something about their energies that you knew they had knowledge, and they didn't have to talk a lot. And Denny Mancini, who was one of my best ever cornermen, as a cornerman and a cutsman when I was a young kid, his brother sadly passed, Tony. Tony passed before Denny. And Tony knew, well, there wasn't much that Tony didn't know about boxing. I used to watch him coach, and I was thinking, yeah, there's not a lot this guy doesn't know. I just know that he knows. And so with my approach to boxing, it is just merely, I think passion takes you a long way. Passion for the game takes you for a long way. And also the professional game has got a habit of sapping that passion if you let it, you know, because it is embroiled in politics. It's embroiled in politics. And so if you can't handle the the politics side of it, it does tend to sap your overall passion for the game. And I'm determined that no matter what happens with me or my fighters, that every day I show gratitude for what boxing is doing for me, or stimulating my brain. Boxing is my chess. Yeah, boxing. If I had to use it as a statement, boxing is my chess. You know, to get better at chess, you got to be into it. You can't miss a beat. You can't drop a pawn. You got to know why you are willing to sacrifice a pawn to your opponent. And that is how boxing is with me. It is all encompassing. And that passion, I have to have from my fighters. I have to have that from the guys that are around me. So that is why I'm kind of particular about the sort of guys I have around me. So in answer to your question, it's been long-winded, but I never stop thinking about this game, about how to make my fighters better. Not necessarily get better myself, but I could get better. But if I can't get my opinions or tactics across to my opponent, to my fighter, then it's pointless, isn't it? You know, I'm very fortunate that I have a Dion Juma that motivates a Dean Richardson. You know, that Dean Richardson now knows when he comes in the gym, and they always say, you know, some fighters like to train on their own. I truly believe fighters should train in a societal pack, because as a species, we are, and we get better when we've got a peer next to us. So Dion Juma, for me, has been a really good motivator for Dean Richardson, who's he's a puppy compared to Dean and Dion, you know? So it's, and that's sort of what I'm concentrating on now. Just the little things, keeping the fundamentals strong. You know, Dion won, you know, when we come to it, you know, when we talk about Sam Hyde, it'll all make sense as to how Dion won that fight.
You did an interview, as we spoke a bit off camera about, with my colleague James Lupton a while back on our website, and you sort of spoke about sort of your roots into boxing. I know believe the first fight you watched was Sugar Ray Leonard against Roberto Duran. Talk to me about what you remember from that.
I'll tell you, funny enough, you know what, I was, you know, as I said, being home gives you a lot of time to reflect, and sport has been my life from a really young age. I mean, I was a massive soccer fan before boxing.
Okay.
And what kind of got me into boxing, obviously, was Muhammad Ali, because I was born in 1968. So I saw the Leon Spinks fight, I saw the Richard Dunn fight, saw those sort of like late 70s fights when obviously he was past his best, but oh my God, at that time he was the most famous man on the planet. You know, if a little 7-year-old can remember those fights, then can you imagine what adults had gone through with him, you know? So those were the first fights I remember. And I remember going to school within a couple of days of the Leon Spinks return. Mm-hmm. I remember crying when he lost to Spinks in the first fight. And I remember after it's so funny. After the return, which he won, I went to school and I was bouncing around in the school and playing football. And then me and this kid got into a fight. I won't name him just in case he takes offense. And I remember it clearly. And started pushing each other as kids do. Everybody started circling us. So all of a sudden, you got a circle of kids watching. And I just started jabbing. I remember Ali had won that fight with a jab. That's all he had left, really, was jab and straight shots. He was a pale shadow. It was now I watch it. In those days, when I watched it, I was just ecstatic that he won. And I didn't know boxing, but I do remember that he used the jab. And that's all I used against this kid. This kid kept coming at me. He was slightly bigger than me. And I just kept jabbing. And he just suddenly burst into tears. And then that was it, fight one. You know, when a kid cries in the playground, the other
The
kid, the
rematch,
horrible
yeah.
kid. So from 78, really don't remember many fights until one night I'm sitting upstairs and the fight. No, that's it. I remember when Ray Leonard knocked out Dave Boy Green. Now, I was a big fan of Dave Boy Green because, you know, he was just blood and guts and gave it everything he had. So I remember being quite saddened by the way that Ray knocked him out so violently. But then it's bizarre, isn't it? I became a fan of Leonard's. So then I kind of knew who he was going into Duran fight, but I didn't know why this Duran fight had such significance. Didn't have a clue. Reg Gutteridge was a brilliant ITV commentator. He spelt it all out for us, but you still didn't. What is it? I'm not even 12 years old. I'm 11 and a half because that was June 1980. So, yeah, that was it. But the fight blew me away. I remember running downstairs. Mum and Dad, they were watching something else. I was like, oh my God, I just saw an amazing fight. I want to be a boxer. And my dad looked at me and then looked at my mum. And my mum goes, she said those horrible words. I'll never forget it. No son of mine will ever be a boxer. And I just burst into tears, ran upstairs. And that was it. It wasn't mentioned again. Carried on playing football. And then got chucked out of the football team about just under 2 years later for fighting, ironically. And then sitting at home watching. So it's really weird how boxing works. Leonard and Duran made me want to fight. Thomas Hearns versus Wilfredo Benitez in November '82 was actually the fight that my dad suddenly said. Me and my dad were sitting watching it, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't understand boxing. I didn't realize that Hearns is out boxing one of the world's best ever counter punchers and boxers that we'd ever seen. All I saw was a boring fight because Hearns was just using a jab, which he couldn't really hit Benitez with all the time. And it was as you know, it was a really, really technical fight. And obviously when you're that young, you don't realise, whereas Leonard and Duran, they were going at it. So it's like, oh my God, this fight's boring, man. And my dad goes, what, you think you could do better? And I go, yeah, of course I could. And he goes, oh, well, why don't you go and join the boxing club up the road? So that was it. My brother took me up to Croydon ABC. And that was it. Got it going. But Leonard Duran is the inspiration. But the actual fight that started it all was Hearns against Benitez.
Who do you rank? I spoke to Dion about this. Who do you rank highest out of Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, Thomas Hearns, and Roberto Duran?
The Fab Four. You know, it's a tough one, right? Because Duran is my razor thin fighter of all time. Yeah, he's my razor thin, and he's second only to Leonard. So, if it was in an order, it would be Duran, Leonard, Hagler, Hearns. If that was the order, yeah. Yeah. And you know, you have to look at Leonard's record amongst the Fab Four. You know, beating Hagler past his peak. You know, but before Duran, he beat a great Wilfredo Benitez in a great fight, and then he beat Benitez, and then he lost to Duran in a classic, which we still talk about. Then he beats Duran in a quasi-classic simply because of the tragic ending, and then he beats Hearns in that time capsule alone from 79 to 81. There's been fewer better in history in my book. You know, I certainly think I said it today on Twitter. In my book, and I've studied a lot of the welterweights, all of the welterweights, because I'm a bit of a nerd that way. And all of the welterweights, and there's been some great champions since Sugar Ray Robinson, but I don't think any of them on that night in 81 beat Sugar Ray Leonard. I don't think Jose Napoles, I don't think Emil Griffith, I don't think Mayweather, none of them. None of them beat Leonard as a world.
Yeah, that was the one that people have been talking about recently. I've seen on Twitter. Sugar Ray Leonard-Floyd Mayweather.
You know, three terms for that fight. Leonard's too big, too strong, too violent, and too good a boxer. So it's 4. You know, we're not talking about someone that couldn't box. He was a beautiful boxer who could, just like Mayweather, readapt his fight plan in the middle of a fight, which is a lot of fighters can't do. That's another key about, that I'm trying to teach my fighters, that fights over a certain amount of time, you've got to be smart enough to compartmentalize a fight. Like the other day, I was reading David Hayes' interview with Tris Dixon, and it was really amazing that he said when he beat Mormek, the goal was not to throw more than 30 punches around for the first 6 rounds. Because what he'd noticed is that everybody, because of Mormek's turtle style, everybody was trying to clump Mormek with loads and loads of shots, not scoring. Mormek's taking them on the gloves, and then he comes on round 7 to 12, where, you know, David said you either stops you, or because you know you're in France, you're never going to get the decision.
Yeah.
So how smart is that? And that's something that I've always said with fighters, you've got to be able to compartmentalize. You know, the other day I was watching Aaron Pryor against Alexis Arguello. Now in their first fight, he comes out bombing. Arguello matches him, and then Pryor goes back to boxing, albeit with a little bit of liquid from Panama Lewis, who I won't go to that. But he changes the game plan mid-fight and starts breaking down Arguello purely with boxing, you know, and then stops him late. So that's how I approach boxing. That's what sort of stimulates me, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there a number of fighters that people can definitely go and watch during this.
Yeah, these, you know, I mean, that's the thing, right? YouTube is, when I was a kid, right, if you wanted to watch any of those great fights again, you had to get them on video cassette. There was somebody that had recorded them, and he would sell them, and you had to pay £20 for a video cassette. Now, these kids have got it on YouTube.
For free.
You look at it, and it's amazing, but they're not gonna know, because there aren't, you know, once again, like Bernard Hopkins says, there's not enough teachers, there's not enough people of my age. I'm not saying I'm the only one, there's a few, you know, but there's not enough of us of my age that want to take a kid past a Mayweather. So most kids think boxing started with Mayweather because of the amazing, Mayweather is our Sugar Ray Leonard in many ways, because of his pay-per-view fights, who he's fought, who he's beaten, and no disrespect. My God, the guy had a phenomenal career.
Yeah.
But boxing didn't start with Mayweather. It didn't start with Sugar Ray Leonard. There were great fighters before Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran. And YouTube, mate, it's all on there. Carlos Ortiz, you know, Willie Pep, Sandy Sadler, Barney Ross, Henry Armstrong, Jimmy McLaren, all of the, Harold Johnson, who was a light heavyweight that so many people don't talk about. Just this highlight reel alone, you're basically looking at the 1960s version of Evander Holyfield. That's how good he was. That's how good he was, you know, in my book. You know, and but these kids don't know about it. They need to know about it, and I think YouTube is an amazing thing, and I've used this time to sort of utilize that, you know.